The UK flood map. 100,000 Britons are at risk of severe coastal flooding as sea levels are rising. Now, with the extreme weather that we've been having since last year, this year as well, record-breaking floods and snow and cold, rising sea levels will leave parts of the UK underwater. That's if the world does not urgently act on what is happening to cause the sea level rises. A polar scientist told Express UK, this is on Express UK by Sebastian Ketley. Now, the new winter storm is again lashing out at UK, and it will be making its way across Europe in the next few days. This is, of course, coming across the Atlantic from the US most times. It's the polar vortex tipping down. And with parts of the UK in the future being underwater, as many as 100,000 Britons will feel the direct impact of these rising sea levels. Dire flood warnings come after scientists found Greenland's ice sheets are melting 7 times faster than they were in the 1990s. This is a picture of one of the neighborhoods around London, or north of London. Basically, they're okay, I have my church clock chiming again. I'm sorry about that. It's 6 o'clock in the afternoon here in Athens, Greece. I have the church right across the street from me, and yeah, it chimes every hour and every half hour from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. So this is one of the this is the last flood that they had about a month ago. As you can see, the water is up to basically to the middle of the entrance door. It's looking through the living room windows. They're like our Cape Cod houses that we have. And unfortunately, most of these houses don't have a basement. You usually have one step and you're in the front door. Whereas in the US and Canada, you have a basement and you have a stoop, or you go up like a couple of stairs to go up into the front door because you have a basement underneath rising the main ground floor. Okay, so these don't have a basement, and they're basically on a concrete slab, and they're, I guess, like 100 years old or so, most of them. Even the new ones are just like that, no basement, and then the house is built on the direct slab, and they get flooded. When you have your house just one step above the level of the road that's outside of your house, of course you're going to get flooded. So this is the recent picture. So you can understand, I mean, this is a real problem. You can't even walk out, you can't even drive around with things like that going on. Now, Professor Andrew Shepherd from the University of Leeds said that the rising sea levels will impact hundreds of millions around the globe by the year 2011. Just yesterday, I uploaded a video concerning the flooding around the United States. As we know, most of the cities are on the coasts, and they're low-lying. I remember I had gone to Hilton Head, South Carolina, for a worldwide meeting one time. We had a rainstorm, thunder shower actually, and lasted for all the days that were there, and the area was totally flooded. And that was just a regular rainstorm. I can imagine what would happen if we had the rising sea levels. This is just unbelievable. Whole communities will be underwater, really. There's no way you can function. You'd have to move inland, somehow higher up. Professor Shepherd said an extra 40 million people by the end of the century would be brought into flooding if Greenland's melting continues as it's going on today. Okay, look, a lot of people say it's not global climate change, it's something else. It has to do with an incoming planet. Our magma plumes are heating up. Volcanic activity under Antarctica is melting. The Antarctica 100 volcanoes heating up, melting the ice from underneath, and that is taking place. And also we have underneath the ice melting in the Greenland as well. So whatever the case may be, we are having sea level rise. And this is going to be a reality. 2060, which is only about 40 years away, and then a lot more impact of this by 2100. So 100,000 of those will be in the UK, the recent ones, so that's really important for the UK, of course. There's a map here showing England and Wales, and of course the same thing would go on with Ireland and Scotland, but they're showing England here. The hub of London, the Thames River will be flooded. north of London, around, just around the area of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, things like that. That whole area there is going to be flooded. And he says we need to make sure we're able to accurately predict sea level rise and then start to look at the places that will be most susceptible. So they are coming out with these maps so people will know not to buy houses there, go somewhere more inland from these areas. Professor Shepard led an international team of 96 polar scientists. They analyzed satellite data to ascertain the rate of Greenland's melting. The study was for a 30-year time period, and they determined that Greenland has started melting 7 times faster than in the last decade compared to the 1990s. The result of this fast ice melt, he said, will affect as many as 400 million people. They will feel the direct impact of this climate change by the end of the century, by 2100. Greenland's melting ice, coupled with the melting of Antarctica, will be felt every year during these periods of flooding. The whole of Greenland, if it melts, will cause sea levels to rise by 20 feet. Now, we know the average elevation of, let's say, Long Island is only 50 feet above sea level. And it gets flooded anyway, around the Hamptons and, Brooklyn. These areas get flooded with rain anyway. Now, the basements are flooded. Now, let alone Montreal. I used to live in Montreal. Every winter we used to get flooded basements from the melting snow. Now, Professor Shepard said, I think this is a very useful way of looking at sea level rise, is to think about annual flooding, because we see this in the UK in November. The weather gets worse and we have intense storms sitting over the country for days. And when that happens, we have several tides in a few days that one of those tides might be high, and that's when it floods. The episode, he says, right now, it's episodic right now, and they say that in many parts of Europe, Denmark, Netherlands, Holland, I would imagine Holland, of course, that once-in-a-lifetime floods will become once-in-a-decade very soon. Now, in the far future, the year 2100, they might be happening every single year. Professor Shepard thinks that this is worrying because it's hard to imagine frequent floods like this, but it will be almost an every year occurrence, and you'll have house damage. You'll have fungus, you'll have rot, and you'll have health problems, definitely. So you've got to move somewhere else. So Professor Shepard believes this is particularly worrying. It's hard to manage frequent floods. Another concern is how fast the government can build flood defenses. And again, they're not going to help. So, for example, he states Holland in the Netherlands, several million people already live below sea level. He said there are 2 ways to judge the risk. The first is a direct risk, and that's correct anywhere that the coastline has a direct risk. And the second, he says, is the indirect risk that's associated with people who depend on low-lying land for produce. So, for instance, most of our low-lying land, he says, is not inhabited in the UK, except for the major cities, but we depend on it as agricultural land. Also, to some extent, he says, we depend on it for recreation and leisure, so it's not a question of simply devastating people's lives. It's a question of making changes to people's lives because they're no longer able to access areas that they do today. So also, Earth's melting mountain peaks, glaciers as well, found global warming threatens to deprive 1.9 billion people of water access, because those mountain ice peaks, when they melt, of course, bring us rivers, lakes, and those rivers are a source of drinking water for a lot of people, almost 2 billion people on the face of the earth. So they will be gone as well, and that's another huge problem. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events, events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.